She apologized for asking a stranger for help at a train station. That quiet apology changed both of their lives forever. "I was just asking. I'm sorry." The words came out so quietly that they almost dissolved into the noise of the train station before anyone could truly hear them. Announcements echoed from the ceiling, suitcases rolled across the floor, footsteps hurried past in every direction, yet the small blonde girl standing near the platform felt completely invisible. She tightened the straps of the pink backpacks on her shoulders, as if bracing herself for a blow that had already landed. She stood in front of a man who clearly did not belong to this place in the same way she did. His dark coat was perfectly tailored, his shoes spotless despite the slush outside, and the phone in his hand looked far more expensive than anything she had ever owned. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his blue eyes were sharp, distant, used to looking past people rather than at them. His name was Daniel Rose, though she didn't know that. To her, he was simply someone who looked important enough to know what to do. She had gathered her courage for several minutes before approaching him. She had practiced the words in her head, repeating them silently while her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid it would give her away. But when she finally spoke, everything she had prepared slipped out wrong, smaller than she intended, filled with apology instead of hope. Daniel looked at her, irritation flickering across his face before he could stop it. He had been running late, his thoughts buried in schedules and missed calls, and the last thing he expected was to be interrupted by a child. For a brief moment, he wondered where her parents were, then dismissed the thought just as quickly. "I'm not an information desk," he said curtly, his voice clipped and impatient. The girl flinched, as if she had expected this answer all along. Her blue eyes dropped to the floor, and she nodded quickly, her blonde hair falling forward to hide her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, softer this time, the words barely audible. "I didn't mean to bother you." She stepped back, then turned away before he could say anything else. Her small shoes moved slowly across the wide station floor, each step heavy despite her size. The white dress she wore looked thin and wrinkled, unsuitable for the cold evening air that crept in every time the doors opened. The pink backpacks pulled at her shoulders, making her lean forward slightly as she walked, as if she were already tired of carrying more than a child should. Daniel watched her leave without meaning to. Something about the way she apologized stayed with him, echoing unpleasantly in his mind. Children usually demanded attention or cried when they were refused. This one had apologized for existing in his space. He glanced at his watch, then back at his phone, trying to shake the feeling off. But when he looked up again, his eyes found her small figure disappearing into the crowd, and a strange unease settled in his chest. She wasn't heading toward anyone. No adult was waiting for her. She didn't look back, as if she already knew no one would follow. Around them, the station continued to move, alive and indifferent. Trains arrived and departed. People laughed, argued, embraced, and rushed away. And in the middle of it all, a little girl with pink backpacks walked alone, having just learned once again that asking for help came with an apology attached. Daniel stood exactly where he was for several seconds after the girl disappeared into the moving crowd, his phone still in his hand, the screen dark where a call notification had faded. He told himself there was no reason to keep watching, that children got lost and found again every day, that this wasn't his responsibility. The thought sounded logical, clean, familiar. It was the kind of reasoning that had guided most of his life. Still, his gaze drifted back to the space where she had been standing. Something about the way she had said sorry unsettled him. It hadn't been dramatic or loud, but careful, as if she had already learned that asking for help came at a cost. He frowned slightly, slipping his phone into his coat pocket, his mind replaying her small voice against the loud chaos of the station. He started walking toward the exit, but after only a few steps, he slowed. Through the glass walls near the waiting area, he caught sight of the girl again. She was sitting on a long metal bench, her feet dangling above the floor, the pink backpacks resting heavily against her sides. She wasn't looking around in panic or searching for someone familiar. She simply sat there, hugging the straps, staring straight ahead as if she were waiting for something that might never arrive. Daniel stopped. He told himself he was only checking, only making sure she wasn't in immediate danger. Yet his feet changed direction without conscious decision, carrying him toward her. As he approached, he noticed details he hadn't seen before: the way her white dress was slightly too big, the faint dirt smudge on one knee, the redness around her eyes that suggested she had cried earlier and forced herself to stop. He cleared his throat softly, unsure how to begin. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "Where are your parents?" The girl looked up slowly. Her blue eyes were calm but tired, holding none of the panic he expected. She studied his face for a moment, recognizing him immediately, then nodded politely, as if he were someone she had already learned not to expect too much from. "My mom told me to wait here," she said. "When?" Daniel asked. "Today," she replied after a pause. "In the morning." The answer landed heavily. Daniel glanced around instinctively, scanning the station for any sign of an adult looking for a child, but the people around them moved with the same indifference as before. "Has she called you?" he asked. The girl shook her head. "My phone doesn't work," she said quietly. It was hers. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He sat down on the bench across from her, careful to keep some distance, aware of how large he must seem to her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she answered. "I'm Daniel." She nodded, absorbing the information without comment. "Why did you come to me earlier?" he asked gently. "What were you trying to ask?" Lily hesitated, her fingers tightening around the backpack straps. "I wanted to know which train goes to the hospital," she said. "But then I forgot the name of it." Daniel inhaled slowly, the noise of the station fading around him as her words settled in. "Why the hospital?" he asked. Lily looked down at her hands. "Because my mom is there," she said. "She said if something happened, I should stay here. But it's been a long time." Daniel leaned back slightly, the polished bench suddenly feeling colder than before. The station no longer seemed merely busy. It felt careless. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, his voice softer now. "I know," Lily replied. "That's why I asked." The simplicity of her answer left him without a response. He looked at her again, really looked, and understood that walking away now would be a choice, not an accident. Whatever meeting he was late for no longer mattered. Whatever plans he had could wait. "All right," he said after a moment. "Let's figure this out together." Lily looked up at him, surprise flickering across her face for the first time. "Really?" she asked, cautiously. "Yes," Daniel said. "I'm here." She nodded slowly, as if storing the word somewhere safe, and for the first time since he had met her, Daniel saw something change in her expression. It wasn't happiness or relief, not yet, but the fragile beginning of trust, forming quietly in the middle of a crowded station that had almost swallowed her whole. They moved through the station together at a slower pace than the crowd around them, Daniel adjusting his steps to match Lily's short stride. He noticed how carefully she walked, keeping close to him without actually holding his hand, as if she didn't yet know whether she was allowed to. The noise of the station seemed louder now, sharper, and Daniel found himself instinctively positioning his body slightly in front of her whenever people passed too close. They stopped near a small cafe by the windows, the smell of coffee and warm bread cutting through the cold air drifting in from outside. Lily glanced at it briefly, then looked away, as though reminding herself not to want things. "Have you eaten today?" Daniel asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "My mom gave me a sandwich in the morning," she said quietly. "But I saved it." "Did you eat it?" he asked. She shook her head again, her gaze fixed on the floor. "In case she came back hungry." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. He ordered hot chocolate and a simple meal, placing it gently in front of her as if sudden generosity might scare her away. Lily stared at the cup for a moment, steam curling into the air, then wrapped her hands around it, sighing softly when the warmth reached her fingers. They sat there for a while without speaking. Lily ate slowly, methodically, pausing between bites as if she was unsure whether she should finish it. Daniel watched her carefully, noticing how she relaxed just a little with every passing minute, the tension in her shoulders easing as her hunger faded. When they finished, Daniel pulled out his phone and began making calls. He spoke quietly, stepping a short distance away but never fully turning his back on her. Lily listened to the sound of his voice, not the words, finding comfort in its steadiness. She didn't understand what hospitals or emergency desks were supposed to do, but she understood when someone wasn't giving up. After a few minutes, he returned and crouched down in front of her. "We know where your mom is," he said. "She's in a hospital not far from here." Lily's breath caught. "Is she?" She started, then stopped, unable to finish the question. "She's alive," Daniel said gently. "She's very sick, but she's not gone." Lily closed her eyes tightly for a second, pressing her lips together, then nodded as if she had expected no other answer. "She told me not to be scared," Lily said. "She said grown-ups would help if I asked." Daniel swallowed, the memory of her apology flashing through his mind. "She was right," he said. "You did the right thing." They left the station together, stepping into the cold evening air. Lily shivered immediately, and without a word, Daniel took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It was far too big, the sleeves hanging past her hands, but she didn't protest. She pulled it around herself, the fabric heavy and warm, and for the first time that day, she leaned just slightly toward him. The car ride was quiet. Streetlights passed in a steady rhythm, casting soft shadows across Lily's face as she watched the city slide by. Daniel glanced at her occasionally, noticing how her eyelids drooped with exhaustion she had been holding back for hours. "Will she be mad at me?" Lily asked suddenly. "Why would she be?" he replied. "For being alone," she said. "For asking someone else." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "She'll be proud of you." Lily considered this, then nodded, her body relaxing against the seat as sleep finally began to claim her. By the time they reached the hospital, her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and even, her small hand still clutching the strap of her backpack. Daniel parked the car and sat there for a moment, watching her sleep. He realized then that this was no longer about helping a lost child at a station. Somewhere between her apology and her quiet trust, something else had begun, something that would not simply end once she was reunited with her mother. He gently woke her, and together they walked toward the hospital doors, unaware that the life waiting for them on the other side would be nothing like either of them expected. The hospital was quieter than the station, but the silence felt heavier, pressing down on Lily's chest with every step she took inside. The air smelled sharp and clean, and the white walls reflected the bright lights in a way that made everything feel unreal, as if she had stepped into a place where emotions were supposed to be left behind. Lily walked close to Daniel, the sleeves of his coat still covering most of her hands, her eyes darting from sign to sign as if she might miss something important. They stopped at the reception desk, where Daniel spoke calmly and confidently, his voice steady in a way that made people listen. Lily stood beside him, gripping the strap of her backpack, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She didn't fully understand the words being exchanged, but she caught her mother's name and felt her stomach twist. After a short wait that felt far too long, a nurse appeared and gestured for them to follow. Lily's steps slowed immediately. Fear crept up her spine, cold and paralyzing, and she hesitated at the doorway of the corridor. "What if she's angry?" Lily whispered. Daniel stopped and knelt in front of her, bringing himself down to her level. "She won't be," he said gently. "And if she is, it won't be because of you." Lily nodded, trusting his certainty more than her own thoughts, and followed him down the hall. Her mother lay in the hospital bed, pale and tired, tubes and wires surrounding her in a way that made Lily's breath catch painfully. For a split second, Lily froze, afraid that moving closer might break something. Then her mother opened her eyes. "Lily," she whispered, her voice weak but unmistakably real. Lily ran to her, dropping her backpacks on the floor and climbing carefully onto the chair beside the bed. She took her mother's hand in both of hers, holding on as if letting go might make her disappear. "I waited," Lily said quickly, the words spilling out in a rush. "I didn't move. I asked someone like you said." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she murmured. "I'm so proud of you." Lily's shoulders finally relaxed, the tension she had carried all day breaking apart as she leaned closer to her mother. Only then did her mother notice Daniel standing quietly near the door. "Who is this?" she asked softly. Daniel stepped forward slowly, unsure of his place but unwilling to retreat. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I found Lily at the station. She was alone." Her mother closed her eyes briefly, emotion flickering across her face. "Thank you," she said when she opened them again. "I was so afraid she would be scared." "She was brave," Daniel replied. "Braver than most adults." The doctor came in not long after, speaking in careful tones that balanced honesty with reassurance. Lily didn't understand everything, but she understood enough to know that her mother was very sick and that things would not return to how they had been before. She sat silently, holding her mother's hand, listening as if the sound of her voice might keep her anchored. When the doctor left, the room felt smaller, the truth settling heavily between them. "I didn't want you to be alone," her mother said quietly, looking at Lily. "That's why I told you to wait there." "I wasn't alone," Lily replied, glancing at Daniel. "He helped me." Her mother followed her gaze, meeting Daniel's eyes again with a look that held both gratitude and exhaustion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Daniel shook his head. "You don't have to," he replied. "I'll stay until you're better." The words surprised even him, but once spoken, they felt right. Lily leaned back against the chair, her small body heavy with exhaustion and relief. For the first time since morning, she allowed herself to believe that asking for help had not been a mistake, and that sometimes an apology was not the end of a story, but the beginning of something quietly life-changing. The following days blurred together in a way Lily had never experienced before, as if time inside the hospital followed a different rhythm than the rest of the world. Morning and evening lost their meaning, replaced by visiting hours, quiet conversations, and the constant beeping of machines that never seemed to rest. Lily stayed close to her mother whenever she was allowed to, sitting on the chair beside the bed with Daniel's coat still draped over her shoulders, even when the nurses offered her a blanket of her own. Daniel came every day. At first, Lily expected him to disappear once her mother was found, because that was how things usually went. Adults helped for a moment and then returned to their lives. But Daniel kept coming back, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late in the evening after work, always with the same calm presence that made the room feel a little less frightening. He brought small things that mattered more than he realized. Fresh fruit. A coloring book and pencils. A warm sweater for Lily that actually fit. He spoke to the doctors when Lily's mother was too tired, listened carefully, asked questions, and made notes on his phone the way he did during meetings, only now his focus was entirely different. Lily watched him closely, learning his habits the way children do. She noticed how his expression changed when he looked at her mother, how his shoulders relaxed slightly when Lily smiled, how he never checked his watch while he was with them. She didn't understand why he stayed, but she felt the difference it made. One afternoon, when her mother was sleeping, Lily and Daniel sat together in the hallway. Lily swung her legs slowly, tracing shapes on the floor with the tips of her shoes. "Are you very busy?" Lily asked suddenly. Daniel considered the question. "I used to be," he answered honestly. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm where I need to be," he said. She nodded, accepting the answer without pressing further. That evening, Lily's mother woke up more alert than she had been in days. She asked Daniel to stay while Lily was sent to the playroom with a nurse. The room felt different without Lily's quiet presence, the weight of unspoken things filling the space between them. "You didn't have to do all this," her mother said softly. "I know," Daniel replied. "But I wanted to." She studied him carefully. "Why?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. He could have given a simple answer, something polite and distant, but the truth pressed against his chest, uncomfortable and undeniable. "Because she asked," he said. "And because someone should have answered." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, though she smiled faintly. "She's always been like that," she whispered. "Apologizing for needing help." Daniel looked down, remembering the moment Lily had said sorry to him at the station, and felt a familiar ache settle in his chest. "She shouldn't have to," he said quietly. When Lily returned, her mother pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," she said firmly. "You were brave." Lily leaned into her, then looked over at Daniel. "You stayed," she said, almost surprised. "Yes," Daniel replied. "I'm still here." That night, when the hospital lights dimmed and the hallways grew quieter, Lily sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Daniel sat beside her, not speaking, simply sharing the silence. For the first time in a long while, Lily felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. It wasn't happiness, not yet, and it wasn't relief either. It was the fragile belief that maybe she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. The change came quietly, without warning, the way the most frightening things often do. Lily noticed it before anyone explained it to her, in the way the nurses moved more quickly, in the way her mother's smiles grew weaker and shorter, as if they cost too much energy to hold. The room felt heavier, and even the light coming through the window seemed duller than before. That morning, Lily wasn't allowed to sit by the bed right away. A nurse gently guided her to the hallway, speaking in a soft voice that tried too hard to sound calm. Lily didn't argue. She simply nodded and walked out, clutching her backpack to her chest as if it were armor. Daniel followed, his jaw set, his steps measured, though something tense and unfamiliar burned behind his eyes. They sat together in the waiting area, surrounded by strangers pretending not to listen. Lily's legs didn't swing this time. They stayed still, her feet pressed flat against the floor as if she were afraid to move even an inch. "Is she getting worse?" Lily asked quietly. Daniel took a slow breath before answering. "She's very tired," he said carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can." Lily nodded, absorbing the words, though her hands tightened around the straps of her backpack. "I don't like when people say that," she said after a moment. "They say it when they don't know what will happen." Daniel didn't correct her, because she was right. Hours passed. The sounds of the hospital continued around them, indifferent and relentless. At some point, a doctor approached Daniel and spoke to him in low tones, using words Lily couldn't fully understand but could feel in the pit of her stomach. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression controlled but strained, nodding once at the end. When he turned back to Lily, she was already looking at him. "You know," she said. "Yes," he replied quietly. "I know." She swallowed hard. "Can I see her?" Lily asked. After a pause, he nodded. Inside the room, her mother looked smaller than ever, her breathing shallow, her skin pale against the white sheets. Lily walked to the bedside slowly, as if afraid that moving too fast might break the fragile calm holding the moment together. She took her mother's hand, which felt warmer than usual, and held it carefully. "Hi, Mom," Lily whispered. "I'm here." Her mother opened her eyes and smiled faintly, a smile full of love and apology all at once. "I know you are," she murmured. "You always are." Lily climbed onto the chair and leaned close, resting her head near her mother's arm. Daniel stood a short distance away, giving them space while remaining close enough to step in if needed. He had never felt so powerless, surrounded by machines and professionals, yet unable to do the one thing he wished for most. Her mother's gaze drifted toward him. "You stayed," she said softly. "Yes," Daniel replied. "I promised." She studied his face, as if searching for something deeper than reassurance. "Please," she said quietly. "If I can't, if things don't go the way we hope, don't let her think it was her fault for asking." The words settled heavily in the room. "I won't," Daniel said firmly. "She did nothing wrong. She saved herself." Her mother closed her eyes, relief flickering across her tired features. Lily didn't cry. She stayed very still, listening to her mother's breathing, counting each rise and fall of her chest as if numbers alone could keep her there. When visiting hours ended and a nurse gently asked them to step outside, Lily stood without protest, though her hand lingered in her mother's until the very last second. That night, Daniel took Lily home with him for the first time. The decision was made quickly, quietly, without ceremony. Lily didn't ask questions. She followed him into the car, exhaustion finally catching up with her, her small body curling against the seat as the city lights slid past the window. At his apartment, everything felt too big and too quiet. Lily stood in the doorway, unsure where to go. "You can sleep here," Daniel said, pointing to the couch. "Or in the bed. Wherever you feel safe." Lily considered this, then walked over to the couch and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. "Can you stay?" she asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." As Lily drifted into sleep, her breathing finally slow and even, Daniel sat nearby in the dim light, staring into the silence. He understood then that whatever happened next, his life was no longer just his own. A quiet apology at a train station had led him here, to a promise that could not be undone, and for the first time in years, he didn't want to escape the weight of it. The call came early in the morning, before the city had fully woken up, before the light had decided whether it would be kind or cruel that day. Daniel answered it from the kitchen, his voice low, his body already tense as if it had been waiting for this moment all night. He listened without interrupting, his free hand gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that his knuckles turned white. When he hung up, the apartment felt unbearably quiet. Lily was still asleep on the couch, curled into herself, one arm wrapped around her backpack as if it were something alive. Daniel stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe, wishing with a desperation he had never allowed himself before that there was a way to protect her from what was coming. But there wasn't. He knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. "Lily," he said softly. "Sweetheart." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening when she saw his face. She sat up immediately, fear rising in her expression before he said a word. "It's my mom," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "She wants to see you," he said. "Right now." They drove in silence. The streets were almost empty, the sky pale and uncertain, mirroring the weight pressing down on both of them. Lily stared straight ahead, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her small body impossibly still. Daniel wanted to say something comforting, something that might soften the blow, but every sentence he imagined felt like a lie. At the hospital, they were taken directly to the room. Lily's mother looked peaceful in a way that terrified Lily more than any machine or monitor ever had. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, and when Lily took her hand, she felt how weak it had become. She climbed carefully onto the chair beside the bed, leaning close, as if distance itself were dangerous. "I'm here," Lily said, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady. "I didn't forget." Her mother opened her eyes slowly and smiled, a fragile, beautiful smile that broke something deep inside Daniel. "I know," she whispered. "You never forget." Lily pressed her forehead gently against her mother's hand, tears finally spilling over. "I was scared," she admitted. "But he stayed. He didn't leave me." Her mother's eyes shifted to Daniel, gratitude and relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For hearing her." Daniel shook his head slightly. "She did all the brave parts herself," he replied. "I just listened." The time they had was short, slipping away in quiet moments and whispered words. Lily talked about small things, about the station, about the hot chocolate, about how Daniel's coat was too big but warm. Her mother listened as if every word were something she wanted to carry with her. "I need you to remember something," her mother said softly, her voice growing weaker. "You didn't do anything wrong. Asking for help saved you." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry I said sorry," she whispered. Her mother smiled faintly. "You don't have to apologize for needing someone," she said. "Promise me you'll remember that." "I promise," Lily said, though her voice broke on the word. Daniel stood quietly nearby, his presence steady, his heart aching with a grief that wasn't his alone anymore. When the nurse finally stepped in and spoke gently, Lily didn't fight or scream. She simply leaned back against Daniel's chest, her small hands clutching his coat as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. When it was over, the room felt unbearably still. They left the hospital together, Lily holding Daniel's hand tightly now, no longer afraid to reach for it. Outside, the day had fully arrived, bright and indifferent, people going about their lives as if nothing monumental had just happened. In the car, Lily stared out the window for a long time. "She's gone," she said finally, not as a question but as a truth she needed to say out loud. "Yes," Daniel answered. "But you're not alone." She turned to look at him, her eyes red and exhausted. "You'll still stay?" she asked quietly. "Even now?" Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes," he said. "Especially now." Lily leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes, grief washing over her in slow, heavy waves. Daniel drove on, knowing that the road ahead would be hard, that there would be days filled with anger, sadness, and questions with no easy answers. But he also knew something else, with absolute clarity. A quiet apology at a train station had changed both of their lives, and there was no turning back from the promise he had made. Time moved forward, slow and uneven at first, as if it, too, was unsure how to behave after everything that had happened. The days after the funeral were quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, heavy but not empty. Lily stayed close to Daniel, not constantly touching him anymore, but always aware of where he was, as if she needed to see him to believe he was still real. Grief did not arrive all at once. Some mornings Lily woke up calm and thoughtful, helping Daniel make breakfast, carefully placing plates on the table as if order could keep things from falling apart again. Other days she refused to get dressed, sitting on the bed with her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes distant and angry at a world that had taken too much without asking permission. Daniel learned quickly that there was no single right response. He learned to listen without correcting, to stay without fixing, and to apologize when he made mistakes instead of pretending he knew what he was doing. The apartment changed around them. Lily's pink backpacks no longer sat by the door like emergency luggage. They were unpacked, their contents sorted into drawers and shelves. Daniel bought her clothes that actually fit, books she chose herself, and a small nightlight because she admitted one evening, almost casually, that the dark felt louder than the light. At night, when memories crept in and sleep refused to come, Daniel would sit beside her bed, not speaking, simply staying until her breathing slowed and her hands relaxed. School began a few months later. On the first day, Lily stood at the gate holding Daniel's hand, her white dress replaced by a simple jacket and sneakers, her posture stiff with nervous energy. "What if I say the wrong thing?" she asked quietly. Daniel crouched down in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Then you'll say the wrong thing," he said gently. "And the world won't end." She considered this, then nodded and walked inside without looking back. That afternoon, she ran out of the building with a smile that caught Daniel off guard, bright and sudden, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I didn't say sorry once," she announced proudly. Daniel smiled, feeling something warm and unfamiliar settle in his chest. "I'm proud of you," he said. A year after the night they met, they returned to the train station together. It wasn't planned as something symbolic, they simply had to pass through it on their way somewhere else. Still, Lily slowed as they walked through the familiar space, her eyes scanning the crowd. "This is where it happened," she said. Daniel nodded. "This is where you were brave," he replied. She stopped near the same bench where she had once waited alone and looked up at him. "I thought asking was a mistake," she said quietly. "I thought I was bothering people." Daniel knelt beside her, his voice calm and certain. "You asked because you needed help," he said. "That's not a weakness. That's how you survived." Lily thought about this for a moment, then reached out and took his hand, not hesitantly this time, but naturally. "I'm glad I asked you," she said. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "So am I." As they walked away from the station, blending back into the moving crowd, Daniel realized that the most important moment of his life hadn't happened in a boardroom or during a deal, but in the instant he chose to turn around instead of walking away. And Lily, once a little girl who apologized for needing help, walked forward knowing something she would carry with her forever. That asking for help could change everything.